have you been following the Bengal elections?
The time difference was because quite often when there's active time in Calcutta, it's passive sleeping time here. But to the extent possible, I have been and trying to read newspapers like Andhra Patrika and so on.
It's been pitched as the battle for Bengal, is the battle for the soul of Bengal. Everyone, all sides are claiming that they are the ones who represent and can defend the real Bengal. What do you make of the type of electoral fight that you're witnessing this year?
It's an extraordinary fight. I can't think of another occasion when an election in a state, or what used to be called a province, has generated so much interest that the prime minister seems to be almost here all the time. On the other hand, it's not so unusual that the locals, the Bengalis who live here, think the election here is really an important thing. But the two together has produced a kind of dynamite confrontation, which is really quite rare in the history of political election, not only in India, but anywhere in the world.
Why is it that Bengal witnesses such violence while conducting its elections? The violence and the threat of violence is one of the reasons that our poll panel actually decided to conduct this over 8 phases.
I don't think that's because Bengal is more violent. I think that's because the election commission wanted it divided, and there was strong pressure. And if you see how the election is going, where the prime minister goes away and does a little bit of work for his prime ministerial role, and then comes back next time in time for another part of the electoral approach here. This is something in which the central government clearly has some ability to participate in every activity in a way that wouldn't have been possible if it was a one-day election or two-day election. Now, I don't know whether that was the reason for the election commission doing it in this form. A lot of people in Bengal who, as you know, are rather critical of the election commission, partly because of the way the peace and order situation has gone, and even the firing that we talk about in which in one fire for Bengalis, all Muslims having to get killed. I'm not going into that story, but it's not the case that it is only the issue of peace in Bengal and the absence of it that makes Bengal prone to having it an 8-day scenario rather than for similarly sized places a 1 or 2-day scenario. There's a element of political reasoning involved in it, and we could discuss that too. As far as the Bengal electoral fight is concerned, I don't know that traditionally Bengal has had more bloodshed in elections. There have been many fights over Bengal over the years. You should think about the history of the British Empire. The British Empire was established in Bengal to start with, with the Battle of Plassey. There were fights going on between Siraj, the last king of Bengal, and the British. The Indian national movement, a lot of the violence in trying to get the British out had its roots in Bengal. So there's a historical tradition too. And, Bengal is also divided between Hindus and Muslims. That has not been traditionally a big divider. On the contrary, if you go back all the way to Bengali culture, even the beginning of the Bengali literature in the 10th century, Jafat, for example, you would see that a intermingling of Hindus and at that time Buddhists, and soon after came the Muslim settlement. The main epic, the Ramayana and Mahabharata, the main translating um, initiatives came from the Muslim kings in Bengal, who were very fond of the epics too. So there has been a tradition of a Hindu-Muslim unity. From time to time, intercepted. The British were quite keen on a division between Hindus and Muslims. It used to be called divide and rule. And there is a certain amount of that going on now. If you take a thing like the citizenship, new Citizenship Act, uh, that is not particularly popular among Muslims because they don't have the rights that the Hindus are given in this. And that generates not only discontent among Muslims in Bengal, but also among Hindus who are very strongly involved with the cause of secularism. After all, Bengal, with Rabindranath Tagore and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, had been committed to secularism in a way that's quite remarkable. And so any violation whereby only Muslims are shot in a particular uh, incident involving police from outside or a major party trying to win an election where the party leaders say, well, we don't expect Muslims to vote for us. Why not? That raises all kinds of questions. So there are reasons for tension that we have to think about. And these are not necessarily to the detriment of the civilization of Bengal. Secularism has been a very, very big cause in Bengal. The most famous poet is Rabindranath Tagore in Bengal. But the next one is Qazi Nazrul Islam. And and the magazine in which he used to publish called Lango, the flower, the thing up top, and the masthead every time was an old poem, Bengali poem from 15th century, which said, above everything are human beings, and there's nothing above that. So the division about which God, which religion is avoided by placing humanity in that tradition. Secularism is very much in on the on the ground, in the battlefield, in the Bengal election.
One person who works with Mamata Banerjee's team, with the Chief Minister Trinamool Congress's team, and he was trying to explain when he was having a conversation with journalists, in which he was heard talking about the fact why Narendra Modi, why the BJP may be doing much better than expected this time. It's because he said that whether it was the Congress or the left, or whether it was the Congress or the Trinamool Congress, they've all done appeasement of Muslims, which is why the Hindu voters in Bengal feel that let's just give the BJP a try. Let's vote for a party which looks out for Hindu rights or the interests of Hindus. To what extent would you agree with that, sir?
Well, that seemed to me to be a very um, approximate history. Uh, Bengal has been a divided ground for a long time. When the British partitioned it early in the 20th century and wanted a Muslim part separated out, and they hoped that there would be support from the Muslims in Bengal to uh, have a part in which their numerical dominance would be acknowledged. What did the Bengalis do? Bengalis, both Muslims and Hindus, were totally against it. One of the poems uh, about uh, the unity of Bengal, Amartya Bangla, became later the national anthem of Bangladesh, given the fact that Muslims have been traditionally a lot poorer than Hindus in Bengal, has been uh, demonstrated by various studies. Uh, there is a need for justice in dealing with it, in, in looking after the poor, looking after those who get in the rougher end of the pyramid of justice. This is important because, um, as uh, uh, people like Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose always pointed out, that it is important to see who are the poor in a region and what can be done to help. Now, some of the concerns with the Muslims came for the same reason as their concerns for Matuas like the Navasudras and the Hindu low caste or the Hindu related tribal population and so on. So I think this whole idea that Muslims have had its turn and now it's for the Hindus and we will teach them a lesson is maybe, I don't know, you didn't mention the name of this
Prashant
gentleman.
Kishore. Prashant Kishore.
I hadn't seen him say that exactly. If he's saying it, he's making a mistake. And the reason is that you have to look people in terms of privileged and underprivileged. Indian government itself had made Muslims underprivileged, so that if you are being maltreated outside India, you cannot ask for uh, home in India as Hindus can. Uh, and that was part of the part of the citizenship. In these circumstances, you have to take a fuller picture.
You mentioned the underprivileged. I want to ask you, why do you think then that the BJP counts among its voters uh, the Dalits, the SC/STs? They're really counting on them, and in fact, these communities voted for the BJP overwhelmingly, even during the 2019 elections.
I think that's a very interesting question. Um, because what happens electorally is not just a matter of what um, preceding justice there was in a particular area. It depends so much on the organizational facility. One of the interesting things to look at very far away from Bengal or UP would be, say, Kerala. Kerala had more untouchability, more caste division than almost anywhere else in India. And yet, because of ultimate organization, in this case of the left, um, the, this, the caste situation changed radically over time, and it was possible for the Communist Party, which ignored these caste divisions, uh, to get support from all the castes. We must not ignore the enormous role that political organization plays. Hindutva has been a very dynamic political movement. Uh, I may not agree with their approach, but I certainly admire many of their organizational features. And they were successful, not in all the elections, for the non-Hindutva parties, what I think of a traditional Bengali secular party, like of which Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose uh, could be a sponsor, a supporter. for such a party, you would say that you have to look at both the nature of the speech, the message, as well as the organization of how you get different people to be promised this and promised that so that they believe you and it is possible for you to get their support. As happened with some tribal areas. For example, take Tripura, the tribal population could be captured by BJP in a way that CPM, which had good relations with them, didn't manage to maintain. So I think we have to look at this organizational side. And that's why it's, if you were to ask the question, if Bengal is so secular, how come you end up a situation in which a Hindu party, uh, whether they win or not, at least could be counted as a possibility? That's because of the organization thing. I don't think I would have ever seen an election of a province in which there have been so much attention paid from the center, from not only the prime minister, home minister, and the chief minister of the largest state in India, coming every other day, as it were, but also spending a lot more money. BJP, of course, does have more money to spend, uh, and making good use of that. So I think I would tend to look at it that way. That is neither a reason for um, um, hopelessness, saying there's nothing we can do. If you believe in your principles, including that of secularism and non divisive justice. You have to work for it and also work for it in a way that your own principles could resonate better with all the groups, whether they be Hindus or Muslims or whether they be Dalits or non-Dalits.
Do you think certain mistakes were made? For instance, the whole thing about Mamata Banerjee in 2017 saying that on a particular day there will be no Visarjan because it was Muharram.
There may well have been mistakes. I haven't studied it in particular. Um, there are also been achievements. The uh, Bengali peasants uh, still have a better health condition than the Gujarati peasant, despite being poorer. And there have been some delivery issues. Food distribution have tended to work quite well, and so on. There have been some mistakes made, and I believe there has been, with the way the farmers treated in India. But that doesn't mean that that the farmers are lost forever to the central government. They've still managed to win elections at the central level. And so it's not such a simple thing because it's very easy to explain
Yes,
saying,
yes.
okay, this is it, that mistake was. When we are doing political analysis, we have to search for the truth. And we have to have some humility also in saying that we may not, what looks immediately like an answer may not really be an answer.
We saw Maharashtra where the BJP lost. Their partners left, formed different alliance, and in that, am I making the wrong kind of connection in saying in Maharashtra they were able to defeat the BJP, the opposition was able to defeat it because of the fact that they spoke about the poor state of economy. They spoke about farmers' issues and what was happening in the markets, in the mandis, and that clicked with the voters. They stuck to their agenda. They built up their own narrative, the opposition, and that worked. Whereas in many of the other elections, the BJP is able to push through its narrative, get people talking about its issues. And if that is something that you think is correct, then do you think that the BJP is able to make its, it's able to have its dominant narrative this time by talking about Jai Shri Ram instead of how the Trinamool Congress has fared with the economy in the past 10 years?
I think in the Maharashtra, there was certainly a lot of electoral um, smartness showed by the anti-BJP and the coalition of the NCP, Congress, and Shiv Sena. Whether there has been similar smartness in Bengal on the side of the BJP, I don't know, because BJP didn't need it. It's not very much a coalition party. It tried to go in its own direction by um, a particular type of conversion. Ram, you point out, uh, Jai Shri Ram has become a new thing. For that, you didn't need a coalition. What you need is somehow Ram who is not a big icon. There are a lot of tactical issues here, and some of the tactical issues have certainly gone in that direction. But things are not permanent. It could easily have gone in a different direction. There's a song connected with Durga Puja, namely Ma Tui Thakbi Kotokon. How long will you be here? That's a question because, of course, unlike in many worshipping, the image of the god is drowned in the case of Durga Puja in the water. The CPM had no rival for more than 20 years. Did they know something which others didn't? And what happened to that when one election suddenly, after having won the previous one tremendously, one election suddenly got all sunk? I think there's the possibilities of varying tactics and strategies which we have to consider. I think if there is a secular party which regards a BJP, which is a Hindu non-secular party, I'd say, and a secular party, another one like Trinamool, to be exactly the same. There's no difference. I think then the assessing secularism is making something of a mistake there, because there has to be a difference between a secular stand and a non-secular stand. And in Bengal, where secularism and Hindu-Muslim unity has been such a big factor that we cannot forget. So I think we mustn't read more into the successes, though we ought to know how come in Maharashtra this happened? How come it didn't happen in Bengal? How come in UP, where Dalits are treated so badly, they managed to win? How come, going further back, Kerala, with the worst untouchability, could generate a communist government rather than and could bury their untouchability, unseeability in the past? There's complex questions you're asking, and I'm delighted you're asking them. I'm very keen that we are going through a time in Bengal where principles are really important. When Siraj-Dowla, the last emperor, last king of Bengal, Muslim king, was defeated by Clive. Clive, on his way to Flasi, writes a letter to Siraj-Dowla saying, I don't mean to fight your war. In fact, you're lying. Why don't we come to peace? Consult your friends. He mentioned 7 names, of which 6 are Hindus, and one Muslim. So this is the Muslim kings. You don't get the impression that it is the king who is trying to advance the interest only of Muslims and ignoring the Hindus. We have had a tradition that we shouldn't lose, that is of secularism.
Did you feel irked, worried, or part of the game when you featured, when the Shantiniketan University named you as having occupied more land than you should have, and are you expecting it to get more and more political because you're a known critic, and anyone who's heard our interview has probably guessed it if they didn't know it already. You're a critic of the BJP. Are you expecting? What was your reaction to that entire thing?
We have a house in Shantiniketan, which consists partly of leased land from Viswavati and bought land from the neighborhood. The Shantiniketan Viswavati land is about is on a lease of 100 years, and that was bought in 1940, I think, leased in 1940 or 41. Suddenly comes from nowhere some idea that about 10 or 15 years ago, there was an enormous mistake made in the land, not just ours, but many other people. And then they kept on saying, we're occupying this land. I can go to your home and say, look, this is the piece of land. Let's get West Bengal government to come and measure whether it's yours or it is mine. It's a very peculiar way of going about it. I was worried not just because of the harassment and the time waste that was involved in it, but it came from a university. University ought to be able to have a better, intelligent way of understanding problems like land holding, like problems like history, the fact that land is not only leased but also bought. Why spend your time doing this as a vice chancellor rather than concentrate on educating and running a good system of education? It was a saddening experience.